Senator Capito.
Thank you. Thank all of you. And we've heard some already. You've addressed sort of partly my first question was what's working, what isn't working. So I'd like to drill down more on the not working portion of it, because obviously the Buy America issue is a big issue. But I want to talk to you, Mr. Bauer, about the one federal decision, because I think in the long run this is going to be the biggest issue. We received from the Department of Transportation responses to questions when we were asking on implementations, and it appears as though the administration is really slowing making these provisions for one federal decision. What would you suggest to improve that? Do you feel like the communication's good? Do you feel like that the department is in on this and wanting to do it? I mean, where are we on this? Because we're looking at trying to move that concept to other different permitting types of activities, and if it's not working at DOT, it's not going to work anywhere else.
Yeah, that's it's a big question. But let's start with understanding that the environmental review process for highway and bridge projects typically takes 5 to 7 years right now.
Right.
One federal decision lowered that goal to 2 years. And I think we're all waiting to see how the administration is going to meet that goal of moving from 5 to 7 to 2. But some of the key things that are part of this discussion is assuring that the department has the ability to compel other involved federal agencies to perform their part of the review.
Is that happening now?
No, not that we have seen. And remember, we are still very early on in the first year of the infrastructure law. States obligated their funds, and a good portion of them have moved to the construction phase, but that's still going to take time. They probably had things in the
pipeline that were ready
I'm sorry?
to go. They probably had things in the pipeline that were already ready to go.
Right.
Okay, so
yes.
go ahead.
I mean, and
so the other agencies, that's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I didn't mean to interrupt, but go ahead. Other issues with one federal decision?
Well, there are page limit requirements as part of one federal decision also, which I don't think is as difficult. But back to trying to make the process as efficient as possible. One of the key goals there is assuring that overlapping reviews, whether through the environmental process or the planning process,
right,
are consolidated and performed in conjunction as opposed to one after another. In general, I think the guidance about how to get from the status quo of 5 to 7 years to 2 years, I think we all agree with the goal. And the challenge is, how do you do that?
Well, as the department, I mean, we're a year into this. It's got a finite life here. So,
yeah.
Are you, those decisions still haven't been made?
Well, I mean, my recollection of when the secretary was here earlier this year, he talked about how they were utilizing the process to focus on categorical exclusions, and and that's great. But it's the environmental impact statements and the environmental assessments that are more labor or they're more time intensive and deserve a lot of focus also, because that whole thing about how do you shave off the years is not just going to happen. And remember, one of the things that's part of the law is that there's a report due next year about the efficacy of one federal decision, and if we don't have some clarity about how that's actually going to achieve the goal of shaving years, that's going to be a pretty weak report.
Right. Mr. Johnson, do you have any comment on that from your perspective on the one federal decision?
Well, it's disappointing that earlier this year, the administration added some additional, the Phase 2 rule.
On NEPA? Under
NEPA. It's difficult at times to get state agencies and federal agencies to work together when we're permitting projects or even facilities like quarries. In California, a lot of times the state regulations are even more stringent than the federal regulations. But if there's any inconsistencies between the two sets of regulations, it just makes it very difficult to get the agencies to come together and agree upon a certain mitigation measure in a timely manner.
Right. So, Ms. Mills, you're right there on the ground trying to figure out how to write your bids to match these sorts of things. Are you seeing this? I know the Buy America, and we'll get into that later. But I mean, are you seeing the one federal decision in any form or fashion moving from your planning to your actual able to bid and get projects moving faster?
I think coming from a state like Pennsylvania, which is known for having a lot of structurally deficient bridges.
I get it. I'm from West Virginia. We've got them too.
I'm from Pittsburgh, so we just had the Fern Hollow Bridge collapse, and there was a rush to get that project back on the ground. So any further permitting and time delays is hard on us in Pennsylvania to correct our problem.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.